There's a moment many parents don't talk about openly. After months, sometimes years, of confusion, appointments, and questions, the doctor finally says the words,
Your child meets the criteria for autism.
and instead of only sadness, some parents feel something unexpected, relief, not happiness, not celebration, but a quiet sense that something finally makes sense, and that feeling can bring a surprising amount of guilt.
Should I feel relieved? Does this mean I'm accepting something too easily?
If you've ever felt this way, you're not alone. Today we're talking about why an autism diagnosis can sometimes bring relief to parents, and why that reaction is far more common and more human than many people realize. Before we begin, a quick reminder: we are not therapists or medical professionals. For individualized guidance, always consult qualified professionals. Because while many people assume that diagnosis only brings fear or grief, the truth is often more complex. For some parents, it also brings clarity. Ready? Because this is Kind Parent Collective, less perfect parent, more real one. The long season of not knowing. Before many families reach the point of diagnosis, they've often spent a long time living in uncertainty. Something feels different, but it's hard to explain exactly what. Maybe their child struggles with loud environments. Maybe routines feel incredibly important. Maybe communication develops differently. Sometimes parents notice meltdowns that seem bigger than typical frustration, or they see their child struggling in ways other children around them don't seem to experience. But during this stage, there are often more questions than answers. Parents may hear many different explanations from people around them.
It's just a phase.
They'll grow out of it.
You're overthinking.
So the uncertainty continues, and that uncertainty can be incredibly exhausting. The weight of self-doubt. During this period of uncertainty, many parents quietly begin questioning themselves. They wonder if they're parenting incorrectly. They ask themselves whether they're too strict, too soft, too protective, or not supportive enough. Every difficult moment can start to feel like a personal failure. When a child struggles in school, parents may worry they didn't prepare them well enough. When social situations are hard, they may wonder if they missed opportunities to teach something earlier. Without a framework to understand what's happening, parents often carry a heavy amount of self-blame, and that emotional weight can be incredibly difficult. When the pieces finally fit. For some families, the diagnosis becomes the moment when many confusing experiences suddenly connect. Behaviors that once seemed random begin to make sense. Sensory sensitivities, communication differences, or emotional overwhelm are no longer mysterious problems. They become part of a neurological picture. Parents often describe this moment as if someone finally handed them the missing page of a manual they didn't know they needed. The child hasn't changed, but the understanding of the child has. And that understanding can feel like a deep exhale after a long period of holding one's breath. Relief doesn't mean lack of love. One of the reasons parents feel conflicted about this relief is because they worry it means they're somehow accepting limitations for their child. But relief does not mean giving up on a child's future. It means finally having language to describe what has already been happening. It means being able to advocate more clearly. It means understanding why certain situations feel overwhelming for the child. And most importantly, it allows parents to stop blaming themselves for things that were never about parenting style to begin with. Relief often comes from clarity, and clarity creates space for better support. The end of the maybe it's just me feeling. Another powerful shift that happens after diagnosis is the sense of validation. Many parents spent months or years noticing patterns that others dismissed. They sensed their child experienced the world differently, but without professional confirmation, those observations were sometimes questioned. When a diagnosis finally arrives, it can validate what parents have been seeing all along. It tells them they weren't imagining things. They weren't being overly sensitive, their observations were real, and that validation can feel incredibly grounding. A path forward appears. Before diagnosis, parents are often navigating blindly. They're trying strategies that may or may not work. They're searching online late at night. They're asking other parents for advice that may not apply to their child's needs. Once a diagnosis exists, the path forward becomes clearer. Families can learn about sensory processing. They can explore communication strategies designed for neurodivergent children. They can connect with communities of parents who understand similar experiences. Instead of constantly wondering what's wrong, the focus begins to shift toward what helps, and that shift can bring hope. Mixed emotions are normal. It's important to acknowledge that relief is rarely the only emotions parents feel. Many families experience a complex mix of feelings. There may still be grief about certain expectations. There may be fear about future challenges. There may be uncertainty about school, social life, or independence. Relief often exists alongside those emotions. Human feelings rarely arrive in neat categories. Parents can feel both sadness and clarity, both concern and hope, and all of those feelings deserve space. Understanding your child more deeply. Perhaps one of the most meaningful outcomes of diagnosis is the deeper understanding it allows parents to develop. Instead of interpreting behaviors through the lens of defiance or stubbornness, parents begin to see sensory needs, communication differences, and emotional regulation challenges. A meltdown becomes something different when you understand sensory overload. A shutdown becomes clearer when you recognize processing fatigue. The diagnosis becomes less about labels and more about perspective. And that perspective can transform the parent-child relationship in powerful ways. For some parents, hearing the word autism brings fear. For others, it brings confusion. But for many families, it also brings something unexpected: relief. Not because the journey ahead will be easy, but because the confusion finally has a name. And when something has a name, it becomes easier to understand. Here at Kind Parent Collective, we believe that understanding our children is one of the most powerful forms of support we can offer them. Because when parents move from uncertainty to clarity, they gain the confidence to advocate, to adapt, and to meet their child where they truly are. And sometimes that clarity begins with a diagnosis. And if today was rough, you still did enough. Catch you on the next one.